Welcome to TheKillFile, your favorite true crime podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Spears. Each week, we will explore the dark corners of true crime, unsolved mysteries, and murder. Join me as we uncover secrets, investigate evidence, and dive into the chilling details of some of the most fascinating cases. Get ready for a journey into the dark unknown, because in TheKillFile, nothing stays buried forever. Hey guys, welcome to episode 44 of TheKillFile. I am so glad that you guys are here for another case. Before we jump in, just a few reminders. If you haven't yet and you want to support TheKillFile, please take a second to rate, review, subscribe on whatever platform you listen on for weekly episodes every Monday. Also, check out the merch shop at thekillfile.com or thekillfile.printify.me for some fun true crime merch that also helps spread the word. Let's get TheKillFile buzzing for the summer before the bonus content comes out this fall. And if you have a true crime story you want possibly read on the bonus content, email it to thekillfilepodcast@gmail.com. All right, that's it for business. Let's talk about today's case. So today's case is one that I had heard a long time ago, and it has stuck with me ever since. You know those cases that you just can't shake after you hear it? This is one for me. Today we are going to be talking about Ariel Castro. Today's trigger warnings are going to be kidnapping, rape of a minor, sexual assault, feticide, and imprisonment. So we're going to start by setting the scene. It's May 6th, 2013, when a neighbor in the Tremont neighborhood hears someone screaming from behind a door of the house that's located at 2207 Seymour Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio. When the man goes up to the door and asks if he can help her and what's going on, a woman is hysterical and tells the man that she's been kidnapped and she needs help getting out. Now, let me tell you something. I saw the interview with the man who helped this woman, and this story, although very heavy, has one funny part, and it is right here. When this man tells his side of what happened when he helped the woman, the way he tells it is just so funny, and he was so sweet to help her, and I don't think that he was trying to be funny. He was just talking, but the way that he was just so nonchalant about the whole situation and wasn't like showboating or anything, I can't even tell you. I freaking laughed, and it brought a little brightness to this story, so I am glad that I got to hear his version. It was awesome. After trying to find the recording, I actually happened upon the 911 call that he actually made for the woman that he helped break out, where he's talking about eating McDonald's and hearing this woman, and it's so funny. And I believe that this is the one that I heard when I first heard this story. It's like a thing that so many people thought his 911 call was funny, and it is. But what struck me funny was his standing interview with the news. So he said that when he came to the door and asked what was going on, that the woman told him, quote, "I've been kidnapped and I've been in this house a long time and I want to leave right now." And then the guy said that he told the woman, "All right." So he tried to open the door, but they couldn't. And that's when he started kicking the bottom of the door. And once it was busted in, a young woman crawled out and the neighbors thought that it was just her. But she turned around and grabbed a little girl's hand and brought her out too. Then the young woman calls 911, or maybe jumped on the neighbor's 911 call, I'm not sure, and said these words that, let me tell you, when I heard them in this sweet tone of an innocent young girl, was absolutely heartbreaking.
Cleveland 911, you need...
Hello, please. Help me, I'm Amanda Berry.
You need police, fire, or ambulance.
I need police.
Okay, and what's going on there?
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years and I'm here, I'm free now.
So you can hear on there that she says her name's Amanda Berry, she's been missing for 10 years, and now she's free. When the authorities showed up to the address on Seymour Avenue, they would find a quote-unquote house of horrors. Not only did they rescue Amanda Berry and her daughter Jocelyn, but they would go on to find two more young women in this home being held captive as well. Amanda, Michelle, and Gina were all being held captive against their will in this home by a sexually sadistic psychopath named Ariel Castro. Before we jump into how Castro came about getting these girls, let's learn a little bit more about Castro himself first. Ariel Castro was born to a somewhat poor family in Puerto Rico on July 10th, 1960, where he was the third child out of four. His parents, Liliana Rodriguez and Pedro Castro, were said to be constantly fighting until the point where they would finally get a divorce. Castro would stay with his mother and his siblings, O'Neill, Pedro, and Bonita. Liliana would take her children and move to Pennsylvania, and then they would eventually move to Cleveland, Ohio. Pedro Castro, the father, would also move his new wife and children to be closer to his children that he shared with Liliana, so he would be there if his children ever needed him. Pedro was said to not help his ex-wife or his children financially, but he was there in other ways. Liliana herself would go on to remarry and give Castro another 4 siblings with his stepfather. So Castro himself had a very large family. Castro would attend Lincoln West High School and graduated in 1978. Castro often attended church and seemed to have this facade that he was a stand-up, faithful man. However, he was not. A young woman named Grimilda Figueroa lived across the street from Castro and his family, and Grimilda and Castro had attended the same school. They quickly became friends, and eventually, down the road a little bit, they would go on to date. While the pair was dating, I'm assuming that they were kind of older now, they both decided to keep living at their respective homes so they could save money. Eventually, the couple had saved enough money to buy their own home in the 90s, a 4-bedroom home with a large, unfinished basement on Seymour Avenue. Grimilda would tell her own sister that everything changed as soon as the couple moved into the Seymour home. Castro started abusing Grimilda, both physically and emotionally. Grimilda, instead of leaving, did what most of us do, including myself, which was to wish, hope, and think that the abuse would change or get better after they had children, or, in her case, after they also got married. Sadly, this would not be the case for Grimilda. In fact, it only got worse. Grimilda often had bruises and cuts under her clothing that she was able to hide, and the ones that she could not cover, she would just blame herself for being a clumsy person. There was said to be one time where Grimilda was beaten by Castro so badly that she had to go to the hospital. Grimilda had unfortunately suffered from a broken nose, some fractured ribs, and at least 1 broken arm after Castro had fucking pushed her down the stairs. Grimilda would not file a police report about the incident, so after receiving the medical care that she needed, she went home, and basically everything was swept under the rug. After this first, larger incident, Castro kind of stopped himself for a while, seemingly afraid of any legal repercussions that may come his way after the savage stair push. It was said in one source that in the middle of the 90s, Castro actually gave Grimilda a severe head injury that would cause her a blood clot. And the source actually also said that he had caused her to have a brain tumor that could not be operated on as well. Now, that sounded a little weird to me. I've never heard of someone getting a brain tumor from a head injury, and after some research, it seems like there are some possible theories of links between the two, but I could not really find any evidence to support that claim. What seems more likely to me, and this is just conjecture, is that Castro had caused another head injury, so maybe they found the tumor at the same time, that they were maybe scanning her head about the blood clot. So Castro would go on to be arrested for this beating, but sadly, he would be released pretty quickly because Grimilda wouldn't press charges, and she actually even asked for his release. I know that on the outside to others, it seems easy to tell her to run and then wonder why she keeps going back to him. I'm going to tell you that until you have been in one of these types of relationships, you just don't understand. You just can't understand. It's like they hold this magical power over you, and it's not just the physical stuff, because I think if it was just physical, most women could just get the fuck out of there after that first incident. It's the psychological abuse that you don't even realize that you're going through that leaves you so fucked up. You believe them when they tell you that they're sorry. You believe them when they say they want help and they want to change. You believe them when they threaten to commit suicide if you leave. And when you throw children into that mix, it gets even worse. It's not only scary to leave your child with an abusive man or woman, but more often than not, it is a man. Even if the man is the biological father of that baby, the whole situation can leave you feeling like a shell of a person, and you don't even realize that you aren't thinking rationally or logically. Usually, you're just scared. You kind of grow used to that feeling, and you may not even realize that it's fear. You also may just want to be loved by that person the way that you deserve, and you do believe that they truly aren't a bad person and that they just made a mistake or whatever. You get so used to excusing away their actions, not only to others but yourself, that it becomes your normal. It's terrible, and sadly, leaving is the absolute most dangerous time. Thankfully, for myself, after about 11 months after having my oldest son, I was left with no money, no help, going to hair school full-time, and didn't know what I was going to do, but I had to protect my son. I couldn't let him grow up in a household full of abuse as I had when I was really young. Although it took me a long time to realize and process all of the abuse, and it still affects me to this day, if I'm being honest, but I am so grateful that my strength as a mother was stronger than his abuse. Grimilda would end up making the same choice, and after she got the courage and strength to leave Castro, she would file for divorce. Yes, girl, good for you. Grimilda was also able to get custody of their 4 children that they shared, named Arnel, Antonio, Angie, and Amelia. And they moved out. Unfortunately for Grimilda, Castro pursued Grimilda, blackmailed, and also threatened Grimilda, which is the worst feeling, being so afraid that your abuser will somehow take your children from you or get custody or whatever, and literally being afraid for their safety. It's like they can be so charming and good liars that people believe that they're just this great person, but you know who they really are and what they're capable of, and you're terrified that no one's going to believe you. It's scary, and you feel like you're going crazy. Grimilda would go on to get 3 separate protection orders, but each time they would be revoked. This is another side note. Apparently, this episode is very triggering for me, but I like to share my experiences with my listeners because there could be someone out there in this type of situation, and I want them to know you're not alone. It's so isolating to be in these types of situations. I remember for me, when I was pregnant with my oldest, I had been abused the day before I found out I was pregnant, but we did know that there was a chance that I could be pregnant at the time. After the abuse happened, the cops were called, and my mother happened to show up right after, and I came out crying and hysterical, and he was arrested. Somewhere during my pregnancy, I believed his bullshit about change and about being better, and I was trying to give my son the best life. I grew up without a father, and I didn't want him to go through the same thing, and I thought things would be better. During the hearing, where I was trying to get the restraining or protection order removed for him, so I was going in on his fucking behalf, and the judge said something that I would never forget. The judge asked what his excuse was, and he said that he was coming off like his bipolar medication, but really it was also like alcohol, either being still drunk in the morning or hungover or whatever. Maybe he was just angry because it happened in the morning. When the judge heard this and saw the different domestic violence charges that he had had from prior abuse to me and other assault charges, the judge said that he was not going to take the restraining order off because now I was pregnant. And I think that he said something about maybe him being dangerous and wouldn't let it off because it was also protecting the baby. I wish that I would have listened and just got away, but I was already in it. And it's hard when you're pregnant and scared to do everything alone. The picture in your mind that you want or hope for doesn't usually match up to what your reality is, but you fight so hard thinking that one day you will get to have that picture. Sadly, you usually don't. In April of 2012, Grimilda would unfortunately pass away from complications of the brain tumor that she had. Thankfully, by this time, Grimilda's children were old enough to live on their own, and it was said that they actually had a somewhat good relationship with Castro. In the early 2000s, Castro was living by himself in the Seymour Avenue house and was said to be a bus driver and also played guitar at various city festivals. His neighbors and people around the community all thought that Castro was an upstanding citizen. However, there were a few things that seemed odd that people didn't really seem to notice. Apparently, while being a bus driver, Castro had multiple traffic violations, and not just for petty things, but things like making dangerous U-turns while driving, the bus full of kids, and eventually he was actually fired for doing some type of maneuver in the bus that actually put all of the kids in danger, which is fucked up. Castro would have numerous backyard barbecues, but he didn't really seem to let people inside of his home, aside from like his family or whatever. People thought him to be a little eccentric, but not really dangerous. Now we are going to talk about a young woman named Michelle Knight. Michelle was always somewhat of a wild child, having gone through a horrific childhood. It was said that Michelle had sustained all types of abuse when she was younger, including sexual abuse by at least one person, an uncle, and this was at the age of 12 or 13. One day, Michelle said that she had had enough of the abuse and decided that she would be safer on the streets than she would be at home, and she packed a bag and left. Michelle started living on the streets and sleeping under a park bench. Michelle said that she also used a trash can to live under, or sleep under at least, that she had stolen a blanket off somebody's back porch, and she would use the trash can and the blanket at night to sleep under a bridge. She said that she could hear the cars passing and the vibrations helped her stay calm enough to sleep, and because she was so short, the trash can really covered her pretty well. Poor thing. She went on to say that one day, while she was still homeless, she heard some singing coming from a Baptist church, and she went inside. Michelle said that she was embarrassed knowing that she didn't really smell great and that she was dirty, but loved the music and the singing, and the church fed the homeless every day at 2 p.m. so she could get a meal. One of her family members recognized Michelle and ended up calling her father, who came to pick her up. She ended up living in a very small, poor home with her siblings where she would use a space heater just to cook a hot dog, and it would take 4 hours just to cook one hot dog. She would say that the house didn't even have the essentials. She ended up kind of mothering her siblings and taking care of them, and her brother would go on to say that Michelle was always a good sister. During high school, Michelle would say that she was bullied a lot and had a hard time making friends. She said that at some point she started dating an older boy from school, and pretty quickly they started having a sexual relationship. Michelle, at some point, ended up pregnant. She was pretty excited about the baby, feeling like she wanted to be a good mom, a better mom than she had ever had, and wanted to do right by her son that she named Joey. There was no mention of what happened to the father of the baby after this, so I'm assuming that she did a lot of this on her own. One day, while Michelle had been out looking for a job, she had left her son with her mother. Her mother's boyfriend, allegedly, went to grab Joey by the legs and I guess fractured the poor baby's knee. Upon Michelle's return, and to her horror, she took her son to the hospital. After this, social services came in and took her son away from her and put him into foster care. So Michelle had been working hard to get her son back, and that's where she was heading to a court hearing about her son Joey when she would run into Ariel Castro. This brings us to August 23rd, 2002. Michelle, now 21 years old, was walking towards the courthouse for an important court hearing about the custody of her son, and she ended up getting lost. Worried that she was going to miss her hearing and desperate for help, she walked into a Family Dollar store and asked the clerk for directions. While she was there, Ariel Castro overheard her asking for directions, and he told Michelle he knew exactly where that was, and he could take her there in less than 5 minutes. Now, Michelle actually recognized Castro as her best friend from high school's father. Michelle felt so much better knowing that she could actually make her hearing, and while they were driving just a minute or two, Castro said that his daughter was actually home and asked Michelle if she wanted to stop by quick and say hi. Michelle said sure and thought it would be nice to see her. While they were walking into Castro's home, he told her, quote, "Oh, by the way, we have puppies." One source would say that Castro had told Michelle that she could have one and take one back home for her son that she thought she would hopefully be getting custody back of soon. Michelle said after they entered the house, Castro would shove her into the room, lock the door behind him, and said, quote, "You aren't leaving for a very long time," end quote. Then, according to Michelle, during a 2020 interview, he started to undress himself. Michelle said she immediately dropped to the floor and started begging Castro to let her go. She said she needed to get to her son, and this just couldn't happen, and just begged him. She then said that he took the only picture that Michelle had of her son out of her hands and ripped it up right in front of her, and said she would never see him. So I watched different interviews with Michelle that she has given over the years about her time in captivity, and this one moment seemed different than the rest. She seemed to be able to hold herself well during most of her interviews while she was recanting what happened to her, but this moment, she teared up and almost burst into tears when she talked about Castro ripping up the picture of her son. It was heartbreaking. Castro was said to have put his hand over her mouth and told her that if she screamed, he would kill her. He then takes Michelle down to the basement and chains her up to a pole that was in the unfinished basement. After seeing pictures of this horrific house, the basement was absolutely disgusting, filthy and cluttered, but also smelled bad and had rats everywhere. He ties Michelle up and then he masturbates in front of her. Michelle said at first she had extension cords on her legs, her arms, and around her neck. To keep her from screaming, Castro had shoved a sock into her mouth. Then, at some point, Castro was able to use chains to keep Michelle tied up to the pole, and then he put a motorcycle helmet over her head to muffle her sounds or screams. Michelle would go on to say at one point the helmet, because it was so heavy, it was pushing the locks and the chains further into her neck, and she actually just passed out. Michelle was left chained in the basement for a very long time in the dark, to the point that her vision is now compromised from spending so long in the dark. Eventually, Castro would move her to the bedroom upstairs, where he told her she would spend the rest of her years. Castro would routinely rape Michelle, sometimes 3 to 4 times a day, and then would leave the radio on so loudly so no one could hear her. Occasionally, Castro would bring her food, but it wasn't much. Michelle would say that she would just take her mind away from wherever she was when Castro would come down or come up to the room to rape and abuse her, just so that she could survive the trauma. One source would say that Michelle's family didn't really look for her because she had run away in the past, although another source said that Michelle's family did report her as missing, but that the authorities didn't make Michelle much of a priority because of her past and her run-ins with the law. Michelle said Castro would use this against her, saying that no one was looking for her and kind of taunted her like, "Aren't you glad that I took you?" and told her that no one cared about her and just put her through mental torture and psychological abuse. Although Castro seemed like such a normal guy in his community, there were people who thought some things about his home or his activities seemed strange and reported it to the police. One person said when they reported his suspicious stuff, like his home being boarded up from the inside where no one could see inside, or whatever, things like that the police, quote, did not seem interested. Which, as shitty as it is, I can kind of understand, because unless it's something more concrete, people are fucking weird. And I can imagine in Cleveland, especially at this time, that they had a lot going on as far as police was concerned. So, as shitty as it is, I do understand it. A woman named Carrie Danes, who was a psychologist, on a video that I watched from Crime Truths, said that Castro was looking for some kind of solution for his urges that he knew himself were unacceptable. A professor who was the head of psychology at Birmingham City University spoke to the fact that he felt that with Castro's actions, that his pathology would be categorized as some type of psychopath. Carrie would also say that Castro made claims of being raped as a child, but no one knows for sure if that's true or not, or if he just made those claims to try and pinpoint his sexual perversion when he was finally caught. He did, in court, claim to be addicted to porn and pointed to this kind of stuff as being the reason that he was sick, but more on this later. Okay, so about 8 months after Michelle was abducted, another young lady named Amanda Berry was walking home from her job at Burger King on the eve of her 17th birthday, and this day was April 21st, 2003. Amanda would say that the morning of her abduction, her mother came in and gave her a kiss and told her to have a good day. Amanda said that she was employed at Burger King at the time, but would have loved to do something in the fashion industry because she always loved fashion and loved to match her clothes and accessories. She went on to say that she actually almost called in sick to work that day because the next day was her birthday and wondered how her life would have turned out had she just called in sick. So later on, as Amanda was walking home from work, Castro pulled up in his car to ask Amanda if she wanted a ride. Amanda said she knew Castro's daughter from school and got in, not even worrying about anything because it was her friend's dad. Then Castro would tell Amanda that his daughter was at home and asked if she wanted to go see her. Amanda said, yeah, sure, because it had been a long time since she had seen her friend. When they got to Castro's home, he showed her around the house. When they got up the stairs, he told Amanda that Angie was out back, but then said his quote-unquote roommate was in that room. Amanda said that it looked like a peephole where a door handle should be, and she could see a girl sitting on a bed watching TV. She said when Castro took her to the next room, it was completely dark, and this is when Castro told Amanda to pull down her pants. As Amanda was crying and recanting this part of her abduction, she said in this moment, she knew that what was going to happen was not going to be good. After this happened, Amanda was taken to the basement by Castro, and he taped her wrists and ankles to the pole and then placed the motorcycle helmet over her head. He left her downstairs in the basement in the dark. Amanda said that she was screaming and crying, but that no one could hear her and no one came to help her. Can you fucking imagine that feeling? The one thing that was said over and over in these different interviews by the girls and the voiceovers were just the feeling of hopelessness. And to me, that's one of the worst feelings in the world. This is a stupid side note, but I feel like sometimes we need a break from like the darkness of these cases. So anytime that my husband and I would start watching the newest season of The Walking Dead, I would start to have nightmares, which is weird because I feel like other stuff doesn't do that to me. But anyways, I would tell him that the very worst part of these vivid ass dreams that I had and that came season after season was the feeling of hopelessness. That feeling that you see in that show among the people where there's just no hope. There is a chance at survival, but there's no big brigade of people coming to save you from what is happening. Has got to be the worst feeling in the world. I can't imagine how defeating that must have been for these young women trapped in this house of horrors. Amanda said, for sure, she thought she was going to die. Now, Amanda's family, after she didn't come back and wouldn't answer her phone, they knew something was wrong and they immediately called the police. Amanda's picture was splashed all over the news and people everywhere were looking for her, including authorities, helicopters, friends, and family. The community all came together to hold vigils and look for her. 1 week after Amanda was abducted, her family gets a phone call from Amanda's cell phone. The man told her family that him and Amanda had gotten married and that she wanted to live with him now. Amanda's mother begged to speak with her daughter, and this is when Castro would hang up and never call again. What type of monster calls this poor girl's grieving mother just to mentally torture them? So the authorities would try to track where this call came from, but because the technology to be able to do this was in its infancy, the authorities were able to see that the call came from about a 30 to 40 block radius. Police officers would later say that they stayed in this area for about a week straight, around the clock, hoping that another call would come in from the cell phone, but it never did. I can't imagine knowing that radius and not knowing where she was. Like, as a mother, God, I feel like I would have wanted to just go bang on every fucking door. Like, I guess it doesn't necessarily mean that she was still in that area. For all police knew, whoever called was just in their car driving and pulled over to call. So it's not like going door to door in that 40 block radius would have produced much to their knowledge, but still, God, that's just horrific. Carrie, the psychologist, would go on to say that sexual predators are addicts, and that no matter how much they act on their impulses or whatever they do, it will never be enough for them. It's not enough for them to just fantasize. They have to act on their urges, and that is why they will do their act over and over again, because eventually it becomes boring for them. The third and final girl that Castro would go on to abduct was a young girl who was only 14 years old when she was taken. Regina de Jesus was said to have come from a very loving family. Although the family didn't have a lot of money, they were close-knit, and Gina had a great childhood. She had a love of dancing with her family and loved to go roller skating, and it was said that Selena was her favorite movie when she was younger. Gina, as a child, was said to be sweet, kind of shy, soft-spoken, but also funny. When Gina was younger, she would say that she wanted to be a lawyer and thought that it would be fun to argue and win in court. When Gina was little, her mother had been someone who taught her daughter how to stay safe. She told her daughter, if someone tries to ask you for help, you ignore them, or you run away, or you leave. And she taught her daughter to be alert at all times. However, on the day Gina was taken, she was actually with Castro's daughter, Ariel Castro, and as they were walking home from school, they had chatted about what they were going to do that evening because it was Friday. Gina told Arlene, well, you could come over, and then she gave up her bus money to Arlene for her to call her mother and ask if she could go over to Gina's house. Her mother said no, so Arlene walked one way and Gina walked the other. Just a minute later, Castro pulled up alongside Gina and asked Gina if she had seen his daughter Arlene. Gina told him, yeah, she was just around the corner from them, and then Castro asked if Gina would help him find her. So she said sure, because this was her friend's dad. She probably had no idea in her head that someone she knew could hurt you. You know, because you're always taught about strangers, but not people that you know, especially back then. As they were driving, Castro asked Gina if she could help him move the speaker at his house, and she said sure, why not? Let me just tell you that I've heard from other true crime enthusiasts, and I heard this one time and it has stuck with me, to tell your children, adults will never ask help from children. They don't need help from children. Now, I'm not just saying like, you know, if you're at home and you're asking your kid and his friend to help you move something, you're already at their house. But tell your kids that no adult is going to ask for a child's help. If they do, that's a fucked up situation, and get the fuck out of there and tell an adult that they trust. When they got to Castro's house and inside, Castro started trying to touch Gina, and Gina would say that she remembers telling him, quote, "What are you doing? You could go to jail." That's when she said things changed with Castro, and he told her, like, okay, you can go home now, but he told her you can't leave through the door that you came through, that she had to use a different door. One source said something about Castro telling her he was superstitious or some shit, and she had to go through another door, which, if that's true, I mean, she's 14 years old. She had just been basically groped by one of her friend's dads, and if he offers her a way out of there, of course you're going to take it. Unfortunately, the door led to the basement, where he would chain Gina up to the pole, and she would say there was a radio on so no one could hear her. During one of the interviews with 2020, the interviewer asked whatever she was comfortable sharing as to what happened to her then, and that's when she said she wasn't comfortable sharing anything. You could tell that it was just too hard for her to talk about the rapes and abuse on camera. So Gina's family immediately knew something was wrong when Gina didn't come home. Before we get into what it was like for the girls staying in the House of Horrors, it was said that the girls were allowed a TV in their rooms, and Gina had been watching TV and saw Amanda's family looking for her, or whatever. It had been almost a year now, And that's when Gina asked Castro if he had taken Amanda also. Castro told her that he had Amanda upstairs and another girl named Michelle too. This is part of the time that when Gina and Amanda were able to see their own families on TV looking for them, that Castro would tell Michelle, like, see, no one cares that you're gone, no one's looking for you, or whatever, just to torture her. It was said that Castro gave most of the abuse to Michelle because she stood up for herself and wouldn't let Castro break her. She said on an interview that Castro couldn't break her because she was already broken. Apparently, she refused to call him by name and only called him dude, which royally pissed him off. And I think it's fantastic. Good for you. When asked if Michelle knew the other girls were there, she said that she had heard a ruckus, like when Gina first came, of somebody yelling, "Get off me," or whatever, but then she didn't hear anything, so they kind of knew, but not exactly. The girls would go on to talk about what life was like for them during their time in the House of Horrors. We know that Michelle would spend 11 years, Amanda would spend 10 years, and Gina spent around 9 years in the home. They said Castro played horrible mind games on them while they were in captivity and continuously raped and beat them at various times. It was said that at first, he kept all of the girls separate and made them kind of suspicious of each other and made them not really like each other by telling the girls different bullshit that one would say about the other or whatever, just kind of laying the groundwork for them to not work together. The girls were only allowed one tiny sliver of soap, and they were only allowed to bathe maybe once a week, and other times it was only once every 2 weeks. Castro was said to fuck with their minds by leaving a door cracked open or giving them a small sliver of hope for escape, and then he would be nearby just waiting to catch them trying to leave, and then he would beat or punish them severely for their attempted escape. So it would get to the point where the girls were absolutely terrified to even attempt to escape because they were all afraid that he would catch them or kill them if they got caught. Which, yeah, I can imagine in your mind, you're like, there is no way that I will ever be let out of here alive because we know who he is and we know where he lives in his face. So I would think, yeah, he's going to kill me before I was ever freed. Castro was one time out on his motorcycle and saw Nancy, who is Gina's mother, handing out flyers, and he asked if he could have one from her, and then he left. It was also reported that he attended one of the girls' vigils for Amanda, I believe, pretending to be on the lookout for her and part of the community. He even helped during one of the searches. The psychiatrist, Carrie, would go on to say that because Castro was a sadist, he probably got some kind of gratification from knowing that the girls felt helpless and being out there pretending to help search for them, when he was really the only person in the world who knew where the girls were. Professor Jackson went on to say that Castro may have been incapable of having any sort of quote-unquote normal relationship in his life, so his solution was to keep captives and these girls as sex slaves. Castro was not a stupid man, though. He had his house completely reinforced and set up in a way that made it near impossible for the girls to escape. So not only were they physically trapped, but because he would do things like loudly walk downstairs, like he was actually leaving, and then he would tiptoe back upstairs to see if the girls were talking or whatever, and when they were, he would beat them savagely. But it was also said that he had a door that locked from the outside as his front door and no handle on the inside, like his house was trapped. As time went on, he was able to lessen the physical restraints because the mental torture started to keep the girls there. At one time, a neighbor, possibly a child, I can't remember, but someone saw a woman being walked around the yard naked and chained up like she was crawling. There was another time where Michelle was outside and she tried to make a run for it over the fence, but he grabbed her, he yanked her back down, and then he took her in and beat the shit out of her as punishment. He also put up boards in his backyard so it would be harder for anyone to see or for the girls to escape. Castro, when he punished the girls, or just in order to keep them under control, would use food as a weapon as well. Michelle would say that sometimes she would have to go a whole week without food, and when he finally gave her something, it was really small and not much. He was also not abundant with water for the girls either. They were forced to use a bucket in their room as a toilet, and Castro would reluctantly throw it out every so often. Amanda would go on to say that the mattress that she slept on was disgusting and filthy, and that it was hard to sleep without the chains digging into her skin or back, so she had to position them in a way so that she could sleep on her stomach and not be hurt because they were so short. During their time in captivity, the girls were raped incessantly. In fact, on the rare occasion that Castro would feel like being nice for a moment, Amanda was able to ask for some coloring books and journals to write things down. She wrote about her feelings or when she saw her family on the news, and then in the very corner of the journal pages were numbers, like 2x or 3x. And when asked, Amanda would explain that she would write the number of times she was raped each day, which sadly was up to 5 times a day. She said that she had written the number in hopes that one day she would get out of there and the police would know what he had done, and maybe, just maybe, he would get in trouble for it. This next part is rough, just a heads up. During the years in captivity, Michelle would end up pregnant. Michelle had hoped, when she first found out, that this would please Castro, or in the very least, that he would take things a little easier on her. Unfortunately, it would be just the opposite for poor Michelle. Castro was definitely not happy about the pregnancy, and while she was pregnant, he would starve her, throw her down the stairs, and try to use an assortment of blunt objects to induce a miscarriage for Michelle. One time, Michelle said that she had been sleeping and she woke up to Castro straight up jumping on her stomach and said it was extremely painful. Sadly, Michelle would be pregnant 4 to 5 different times during her captivity, where Castro each time would beat the baby out of Michelle in order for her to have a miscarriage. Now she is unable to have children because of the scarring in her body. During one point, Amanda would also become pregnant, and instead of Castro beating the baby out of her, Castro allowed her to continue her pregnancy and have the baby. Professor Jackson commented to the fact that Castro may have felt like Michelle was maybe lower or less than, and that's why he would not allow her to keep her babies. He may have favored or didn't really look down upon Amanda and Gina in the same way that he did Michelle. Michelle would go on to say that she definitely felt like he hated her the most. Amanda would go on to give birth to a baby girl who was named Jocelyn in 2006. Now, not only was it so fucked up for Michelle to be beaten out of being pregnant so many times, but in a cruel twist, Castro would force Michelle to deliver the baby. He told Michelle that she would deliver the baby, and if anything went wrong, that he was going to kill Michelle. Turns out that Michelle had actually been on 2020 once when she was very young, but because she had helped deliver a baby where maybe it was her mom or someone she knew, because I remember the baby having the last name of Knight, like hers, but she tried to call an ambulance and the baby was already coming, so she was kind of describing her experience on TV as she delivered the baby. Castro bought an inflatable pool for the birth. Thankfully, and despite not having any real medical care, Amanda gave birth to a baby girl who was named Jocelyn, and the baby was fine, but Amanda nearly died without medical help. Neighbors would later on say that sometimes they would see a little girl in the window at the very top of the house, and they would wonder whose daughter it was and where the mother was. This would be Jocelyn. Oh my God, can you fucking imagine delivering this baby with all of those feelings of being scared and wanting to help this baby live anyways, but then the pressure of what if something goes wrong? Also, maybe the feelings of jealousy that you weren't allowed to keep your baby, but this girl was. Not that it's the girl's fault, but you can't help the way you feel. You're just fucked up. The girls would go on to later say that Castro used them against each other to be jealous at times. Why is this girl getting more food than me or better clothes than me? Gina was said to have felt like his favorite for a long time. During their time of captivity, Castro would not only have backyard barbecues where people were there, but he also had times where his family would come over. He would either chain the girls up together in the basement and told them if they made one noise, he would come down and kill them all. Or he would block off the entrance to one of the floors that the girls were on with chairs or couch cushions or speakers. And when interviewed, Michelle would say no one questioned, why is it like that? And she thought that was weird. In the recreation model of Castro's home, I believe a couple different news channels did this, Michelle was able to point out the different areas where they were kept, and it seemed like there were multiple floors to this home, at least 3 or 4. And in these areas, it seems like these houses were kind of close together, but they're all a lot taller than regular homes. The girls never made a noise because they were scared to die if they did, so no one ever knew they were there. It was said that Castro was not a nervous type of person, that he could keep his cool at any given time. In 2008, Castro was pulled over on his motorcycle for driving without the correct license, and he wasn't bothered in the least. I've heard this before about psychopaths not feeling fear or anxiety, and that's why they don't get nervous. But after doing a little research on the subject and reading some of the findings from research from the National Library of Medicine on the subject, They're finding now that psychopaths may have anxiety or fear, but they don't respond to it like the rest of us would. They would say during their research and study they conducted, quote, moreover, psychopathic traits in adults and children are also associated with hypoactivity of the amygdala, the critical structure for the processing of threat-related stimuli, meaning they don't have as strong of a response to a threat as others would. These results, and by the way, this shit is fascinating to me, could be why polygraphs aren't admissible in court, because people with these psychopathies can beat them easily by feeling less anxious or fearful of being caught. I wonder what that's like. Not only am I a diagnosed anxiety disorder person with like panic attacks and all, but I am such a rule follower that I am terrified about any sign of trouble. Look, I have been in trouble one time in my entire life, and I will always be honest about it. Before this incident, I had only had one speeding ticket in my life, and that's still true. I got wasted after moving with a friend on a whim to North Dakota, and we got in trouble for breaking a few car windows and not even stealing anything. Just dumb, drunken, blackout shit. But it set my ass so straight having to spend more than a month in jail because I didn't know anyone else in the state who could bail me out, because the only person in the entire state that I knew was in there with me. She got bailed out by her family, but I was stuck, and that sucked so bad. But it taught my ass to never be stupid again, which I haven't. And that was when I was like 21 or 22. I can't imagine getting pulled over by the police and it not affecting my entire being. The thought of that blows my mind. During the girls' captivity, at one point, Gina would be chained up with Michelle in her room, and they became like sisters going through the trauma together. She would say that they would watch TV together, tell each other jokes, and did anything just to make the time go by. Michelle would later say that after having to witness each other being raped in the same room, that Michelle would just hold Gina's hand and tell her it would be okay. They tried to lift each other up and give each other strength. The girls were said to be given weird rules during their captivity, like they could only use 1 drop of dish soap to clean the entire sink full of dishes. Or, when they were allowed to make food, they had to keep the pan perfectly in the center of the burner and not off to like one side or the other, in the least. Amanda would later say that they were constantly in their minds thinking like, hey, I wonder if I could go out that window or out that door or whatever, but they were terrified from the times that they had gotten caught and beaten so badly. Gina would later say that she had thought about putting rat poison in his beans or pine salt in his eyes, but ultimately she was too afraid. There was one time where Castro's daughter was coming to stay for a bit with Castro, and he had to think quickly about like how to get the girls out of the house, so he chained them all up in a van and put wigs and disguises on them and left them there. Amanda said that as he drove them a little down like the driveway or the road or whatever, he had gotten out of the van, but it was still running. And she said that all the girls had quickly said like out loud, should we put it in drive and I can reach the gas pedal and we could just run him over? But the moment passed too quickly before they got the courage, and then they were just chained inside the van for a while in the hot, sticky, small space. Amanda said that this was really the first time that the girls started talking to each other and bonding. Amanda said she regretted not trying to run him over. Another thing that happened during their captivity was that Castro bought the girls a puppy, and they were so excited to have this that would give them a little reprieve. I believe this was before the baby was born. And then out of anger and to punish the girls, specifically for Michelle doing something that she shouldn't have, he killed the puppy right in front of them. Castro was a drinker, which would sometimes fuel these rages that he would go on. Gina said that there was one time where he asked her if she wanted to play Russian roulette. Gina said that she thought, sure, why not? Because I'm never going to be able to go home. Castro would show Michelle that there was 1 bullet in the gun, and then he put it to his own head and he pulled the trigger. Then he handed the gun to Michelle, who took it, and she put it up to her head. Castro stopped her and said, let me pray real quick. Then he told her, if you love me, you won't pull that trigger. But if you hate me, then you'll pull it. In that moment, Gina said she was shocked. Like, why in the hell would he think that I love him? And she said she pulled that trigger without any hesitation, but nothing happened. I wonder if she couldn't have just pulled the trigger at him in his head until the bullet came out. Like, she had the gun, right? Maybe she was just afraid that it was like a blank and he would beat her. Jocelyn, Amanda's daughter, was a nice little distraction for all of them. They all kind of helped her grow up. It was said that Jocelyn seemed to develop appropriately for her age and that Castro even brought his new daughter to his own mother's house, telling his mother that he had had this baby out of wedlock. One source would say that Jocelyn wasn't allowed to know Michelle or Gina's name in case she accidentally said them somewhere. Apparently, after Jocelyn was born, Castro softened ever so slightly and would allow the girls outside for a little bit under the strictest of supervision, of course. Professor Jackson said it really speaks to his pathology that he was able to kill these unborn fetuses and be this monster of a human being, and then was also able to care and nurture his daughter. Which I feel like we hear this a lot in psychopaths or serial killers, that they have like two different sides of their beings. Like BTK was a family man. Ted Bundy had his longtime girlfriend and her daughter that he loved so much. Shit, even the Golden State Killer ended up having a family with grandkids that would never have guessed that he was this deranged killing psycho. It's fucking terrifying that this could be your own neighbor. Don't ever forget that. The house was said to be filled with mirrors in the corners of the rooms and halls so that he could know where the girls were at all times. If they weren't chained up, he could watch them. Amanda said that some of his quote-unquote nice things would be to tell her, well, maybe you need a nice shower. And then she would be forced to shower with him. And since he was being nice and giving her this shower, he expected sex. It was said that Castro almost seemed to think that he was in some sort of relationship with the girls. He's such a sick fuck. Okay, this brings us back to the day of May 6th, 2013, when Castro had left the house and Michelle heard Jocelyn, the little girl, yell that he was gone. He had left Amanda's door unlocked on accident. Michelle and Amanda both thought that it might be another trap to test the girls, to see if they try to leave, and then he beats you horrifically if you do. But this time, it was not a trick. This time, it was a mistake made by Castro. Amanda ran down the stairs and started hysterically beating on the front door, kicking and screaming loudly until the neighbor across the street heard her and came over to help with a few others. When the police arrived on scene, they saw a girl standing in the middle of the street and realized that this call about a woman being Amanda Berry was not a hoax. When the police busted into the home, Michelle said she heard some banging and then she heard the police yelling that they were the police. The authorities said they could not believe that there were two more girls kept inside this horrific house. Apparently, Michelle looked at Gina and said she couldn't believe it, but they were going home. The officer who found Michelle said that when Michelle saw her, she jumped into her arms and said to the cop, quote, "Don't let me go. Don't let me go." And the officer said she responded with, quote, "Honey, I'm not going to let you leave." When asked what the first thing Michelle wanted to do when she got out was, she said she just wanted to kiss the ground that she was walking on. All three of the girls were taken to the hospital, and despite their beatings, Gina and Michelle were relatively okay, but Michelle, being only 83 pounds, had it a bit harder than the other girls. When asked when she truly felt free or even safe, Michelle said it was when she was in the hospital and everyone was hugging her and telling her it was all right and that they loved her. She said she had never heard anyone tell her that before, which was just heartbreaking. One officer that was at the hospital said Michelle had been given like a Nutribar or granola bar or whatever, and said that when she ate it, apparently she asked scaredly towards the nurse if there was just any way she could have maybe just one more. And the nurse told her she could have as many as she wanted. And Michelle grabbed and hugged the nurse's arm. Castro was arrested and charged with kidnap, abuse, assault, forced imprisonment, and for the miscarriages or feticide. Castro's two brothers, O'Neill and Pedro, were also arrested on suspicion of compliancy because they were over at Castro's house so often, but they weren't held very long and they were eventually let go without any charges. Prosecutors wanted to go for the death penalty for his crimes, so Castro opted to work with the authorities to avoid the death penalty. During his trial, Castro would confess to being an ill man and would blame an addiction to porn for his actions. He would also say that most of the sex inside of the house was consensual and that he was just acting on instincts and that he did not hold these women against their wills. Castro said, quote, "I believe I am addicted to porn to the point that it really makes me impulsive and I just don't realize that what I'm doing is wrong." Are you fucking serious? You don't realize that beating women is wrong? That captivity is wrong? That rape is wrong? Ugh, I hate this fucker so much. Just own up to what you did, you fucking wiener. Look, in my house, we don't use the P word that rhymes with wussy because, let's be honest, a vagina is a hell of a lot stronger and badass than a penis. So why is it used to call something weak? Nope, it's a wiener at our house. Fuck that. I can't believe he tried to say that this stuff wasn't against their will. Michelle was able to read an impact statement at court and would later say that it was very important to her to be at his trial because she wanted him to know that he did not define her and his shit was in the past. She told him that he took 11 years of her life away, and when an interviewer asked later if she thought he heard her message that day, she said yes, he had to, because at one point he hung his head down and his own children were in the courtroom listening to his atrocities. Castro was sentenced to life in prison plus 1,000 years for his conviction of over 900 charges of rape and assault. 6 days after Castro was sentenced, his house of horrors was ripped down to the ground, and Michelle and Gina both attended that demolition. Just 1 month into his life sentence, Ariel Castro fucking hung himself in his cell. This makes me so fucking mad. What a goddamn coward. He was 53 years old when he committed suicide. Michelle would say in an interview that he didn't need to hurt himself. When asked why she felt that way, she said that she doesn't fill her heart with hate and that she forgave him and that he didn't need to die. She said then she realized he didn't want to face what he had done. He didn't want to suffer from others in prison, and then she called him a coward, which is exactly what he is. Michelle would go on to write a book called Finding Me, A Decade of Darkness, A Life Reclaimed, which I'm considering listening to or reading, and if you have, let me know how hard it was to get through. Gina also released a memoir called Hope, a memoir of survival in Cleveland. Sadly, because Michelle was gone for so long, Joey had been adopted out. Michelle was able to track him down, but I'm not sure if she's been able to see him. I heard in one source that she actually immediately asked for him when she got out, but of course he had been adopted. And at the time, the adopted family was refusing to let Joey see her, probably not wanting to traumatize him, which I can understand, but poor Michelle. This was a fucking horrific thing for her from beginning to end to go through with her son, the miscarriages, and now not being able to have any more babies. It's heartbreaking. And that, my friends, is the awful, sad, but then triumphant story of Ariel Castro, pedophile, abductor, rapist, and all-around scumbag. This story was one that when I first heard, it just really stuck with me in a way that the fear held over these women just blew my mind, and it made me feel so sorry for them. I feel like they deserve to have their stories told and celebrated, that they were able to make it out and are making claims over their own lives again. I hope nothing but the absolute best for them and happiness in this life because they all deserve nothing less. I can't believe what all they went through, and I can imagine that there's no going back to a quote-unquote normal life after that. But I will say that I love to see Michelle smile when she shares on interviews, and I feel like if it were me, of course you never really know unless it happens to you, but I completely understand her wanting to tell this motherfucker, like, you're not gonna get the best of me, and not wanting to let him have the satisfaction. Hell yes. Fuck that guy. Also, I absolutely cannot believe that this asshole used his own daughter as a way to capture these girls. I remember reading that at least one of his daughters, maybe more, I don't know, but they apologized to the girls for their father, which, can you imagine finding out that your own father used your name to lure young girls and then keep them captive for over a decade? I would be so pissed and distraught. I wish he wouldn't have gone out the way he did. It makes me so mad that he didn't have to face much of a consequence for his actions. What a fucking loser. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I hope to see you guys next week when we will cover another case here on The Kill File. Stay safe, you guys. Bye. Well, that's it for today, you guys. Thanks so much for hanging out with me and listening to another episode of The Kill File. Don't forget to check out the merch shop, either at thekillfile.com and click Shop Merch, or you can visit thekillfile.printify.me/products for some awesome true crime merch. Also, follow along on the Kill File's socials for posts about episodes, pictures about the cases, for updates, and more. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and X as The Kill File, and we are on YouTube and TikTok as The Kill File Podcast. Also, feel free to check out the website at TheKillFile.com, where you can learn more about me, your host. You can learn a little bit more about how The Kill File got started, and you can suggest a case right there on the website. Let me know in your case suggestion if you want me to shout out your name if I cover your case. There is contact info on the site as well. You guys have no idea how much I love to hear from you. It makes my whole day. Come back on Mondays wherever you get your podcast fix when we will cover another case on The Kill File, where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye.